I'm Austinlugo.
I'm Andrew Hart.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Green Room.
So I suggested The Green Room because about a month ago you suggested I watch Murder Party, which was this director's first film. It has sort of this quaint, almost kind of like low budget feel to it because it is incredibly low budget, and you can see it feels almost like a student film at times. But I think there's something you can certainly see this eye of the director in it, and sort of the type of films he wants to make. And I think there's a certain charm to it. I don't think it's a perfect film by any means, but I think that charm made me want to suggest The Green Room, which I think is a incredible improvement on what he's done in the past. But Andrew,
Mhm.
what is The Green Room?
The Green Room is basically the Predator, but instead of the Predator, well, yeah, the Predator, but instead of the Predator, it's white nationalists. Just with the, I don't know if you've seen Predator or not. You know, one of
Have
the
you
greatest action movies ever made. One of the greatest, probably one of the greatest movies ever made. Um, and for some reason, there were a lot of similarities with it, but there's also a lot of similarities with Murder Party. And yeah, like you said, like uh, it was Murder Party and then Blue Ruin, which is a movie that I've also heard is good, but it's also another quaint indie movie.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's just like one guy in the movie, the one actor. But then yeah, Green Room is kind of like almost like his like big debut, I guess you might say, where he's got all these famous actors and obviously way more money and stuff. And yeah, no, it's yeah, and it's basically just a horror film. It's basically like a horror thriller film. Um, yeah.
So we open up on this green cornfield. There's a van in the green cornfield, and we're introduced to basically our well, most of our main characters at this moment. They're all in a band, and they wake up in the middle of the day in a cornfield. And it's quickly established that they had been driving somewhere, and apparently one of them fell asleep at the wheel, whoever was at the wheel, and they had to run into a cornfield. It's kind of I think in a very interesting way, it sets the tone for the film because it's kind of weird and sort of I don't want to say absurd, but there's this sort of absurdist aspect to it. This almost like David Lynch light. Uh, just something kind of weird, sort of off about it. Like it just doesn't feel right. And of course, the whole film, uh, called The Green Room, is the color grading on this is very green. Like everything is just like super green. There's just green everywhere. There's like everything has this like green tint or hue to it, which I think works well in this film. And so
Mhm.
they wake up, they're in a cornfield, you're introduced to all these characters, they all have their, it's sort of your classic, uh, 4-person, 5-person group where they're basically, the characters, the only difference between characters is like, they all have this one thing that makes them them. There's like the one that's the fighter, there's, the lover, there's the woman. And then it's just like, these small little differences. And they're driving around and, they get out, they drive to
It's
a,
also worth noting that they are a punk band called Ain't Rights.
yes,
They're a punk band. They're traveling this Pacific Northwest because they're going to a gig to play their live music.
that's right. And so they drive to the first gig where they meet this guy, Mohawk man.
He's a radio host. Like he has a
Yeah.
radio show magazine or something. Um, yeah, he has like this giant mohawk. Yeah, it's
Uh,
funny.
and they're just kind of like sitting around. They just kind of establish, what kind of band they are, and then they have an interview with the guy with the mohawk, and it kind of establishes what kind of band they are. They are not in. They're like kind of like I guess there's a lot of similarities between this and Murder Party, but one of the similarities I thought about is where Murder Party is kind of making fun of the sort of artistic elite, or like painters and the like, and how they what they define as art. In this way, it's kind of making fun of musicians like this band who believe that uh, this like true music can only come from like this one way, and they're kind of they kind of have these sort of silly beliefs, and uh, well, I guess not silly to them, but they don't have any social media presence. They only believe playing in person. They only release the music on analog. It's just kind of these sort of ideals that I don't think the director or writers are necessarily criticizing in any way. I think they're just kind of uh, poking fun at a bit.
Yeah, it's the punk DIY mindset where it's like, you go to the show you by yourself, you don't get a label, you don't work for a label, you don't have like a manager or a boss. Everything you do yourself. You do, you make the records yourself, you produce everything yourself, you don't get you don't get like a tour, truck or anything like that. You do everything by yourself, which is difficult, but that's kind of the mindset of of maybe not every punk, and that's what it's all about, and it's the punk mystique of just like I'm gonna die, like the idea that like one day I'm gonna die, like any day now, I'm gonna die any day now, you know what I mean? It's kind of the it's like, so I better like like live as fast and as hard as I possibly can. Yeah, and that's discussed when they're talking with the radio guy, and he's asking them questions about like what their desert island band is and stuff like that. And I will say I like the as someone who likes punk rock music a lot, I love the aesthetic of everything, and I like I guess I could say I'm a little biased with that stuff. I just like the sensibilities of it, and I like how it comes through. And but yeah, after talking with the guy's like, actually, the gig was canceled, and I didn't have a way to contact you. I'm sorry. So they play like a Mexican restaurant. They make like $2. They make no money. And the Mohawk guy, was like, okay, look, I have a cousin. He owns a venue, um, and I can put in a good word from you. His cousin Daniel, and you can head out there and you can play a few shows and you'll be paid pretty well. It's in the middle of Oregon, the middle of Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, in the middle of Oregon,
Oregon
outside of
somewhere.
Portland,
Yeah.
in the middle of the wilderness. It's basically just like a facility, gig place out in the middle of nowhere. And they're like, okay, fine, we don't give a fuck. Let's just go out there because we went all the way out here. I think they said they were from DC.
Yeah.
And if you listen to their music, it does kind of have like that Discord Records kind of aesthetic, kind of like Fugazi, or Minor Threat, and including, of course, the main character played by Anton Yelchin. He wears a Minor Threat shirt the out of step Minor Threat shirt the entire time. And so I thought the band sounded pretty good actually when they do perform the couple of times that they do. Yeah, so they go out there and they quickly realize that something's wrong. Basically, everyone there is very different than they are, I guess you might say. Yeah.
Yeah, they get out there, and it is pretty quickly established that this is and even the guy with the mohawk said, hey, their politics are quite far to the right. And there's this funny quip of like, well, they're not burning crosses, are they? And he's like, well, just stick to the music. And when they get out there, they very quickly realize there's Confederate flags, there's swastikas, all of your kind of
yeah, dudes with like the cousin guy, you can see like he has like the Flying Eagle Nazi logo. Yeah, no, it is a neo-Nazi skinhead bar and venue. They're like opening for a National Socialist black metal band. I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know why. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Like I guess with like, for some reason, I don't know what it is, but like metal and punk bands, especially black metal bands, like that are openly white nationalists, they have like big audiences. Like people like them a lot, including like some of the founders. I'm a big black metal fan. I'm not a National Socialist black metal fan, but even some of the people who founded black metal are pretty like far right. They're pretty National Socialists, very, they're neo-Nazis. So for some reason, in almost any other genre of music or media, like that would be
Yeah.
shown. But for some reason, punk and metal bands have like very big audiences, whether they are neo-Nazis or not. So it's kind of cool that that's kind of like shown in the movie. Um, and of course, they're like, they get there and they're like, it doesn't matter, who cares? Let's just play the show anyway.
Mhm.
And of course, they're they have, of course, they start the show with, do you know what the song that they play at Austin?
Uh-uh.
They played the very famous Dead Kennedys song, one of the what I think is one of the greatest punk songs of all time, Nazi Punks Fuck Off, which was written by the band after they noticed a lot of skinheads were going to their shows. So they wrote that song so that they could perform it to let people know, like, Nazi punks, fuck off. So they started off their show with that song, and of course they get a little bit of booze, and I like that. I thought that was a funny thing, and like I said, the imaginary band sounds good. And during the set, Pat, who is the Anton Yelchin character, he notices that there's two young women that are in the audience, and then they leave, and he's like, okay, that's kind of weird. So, and then this is kind of where the actual movie starts.
Mhm. Yeah. So after their set, which apparently goes pretty well because there's, they do like this slow motion mosh sort of thing, which I think it looks pretty nice. And they go back to the green room that they were supposed to go to. And as they're walking towards the room, all of their stuff is just like on the side of,
Yeah.
like, it's in the hallway. And they're like, oh shit, I guess we just have to go. And they're like, yep, here's your money, see ya, bye. So they're taking their stuff, they're taking their money. And one of the characters, the woman, realizes that she left her phone in the green room. And so she's going to go get it. But then, one of the other characters, I don't know any of their names.
It was an Anton Yelchin character. Yeah, he goes into the room to get her phone.
Mm-hmm. And as he goes and grabs the phone, he sees a woman dead on the floor, stabbed in the head by a knife, which of course freak anybody out. So, he's quickly trying to dial 911. They see him try to dial 911, and, he's like on the phone. He's like trying to explain what's happening. They're sort of being surrounded by skinheads and these, big, beefy guys. And the phone is taken away from them, and I think they get outside, don't they? And then, yeah, they get outside, and then a gun is pointed at them. And they're like, you need to go inside. And of course, they're like freaking out. They don't know what to do. They just saw someone stabbed in the head. And at this time, you're not really sure what's going on. It's clear that, like, the band's in the right, but you're not really sure, like, what their kind of motives are. And the guy's like pointing guns at me. He's like, hey, just, we're going to figure this out. We're going to call the cops. Just go into the green room. And not wanting to get shot or hurt, they go into the green room with the other band and the dead woman still in there, where they are locked in with a very large man and his gun.
And they're also locked in there with Imogen Poots, who's the friend of the girl that got killed as well.
Correct.
Yeah, so they're in there, and right when, that whole sequence of events, like right when he walks in and sees the dead woman, very good, very good. A lot of tension throughout the movie for the most part. I would say that part, up until a certain part of the movie that we'll get into, is very, very tense. There's a lot of very good tense moments.
Yeah.
That are very, very, very good. Really good. And so the owner, Darcy, right? The skinhead leader, played by Patrick Stewart.
The one and only.
He's pretty good. He shows up, and he's told the situation. He's like, okay. So he basically arranges. It's kind of convoluted, but basically, like, he's basically saying, like, okay, we need to eliminate all witnesses, make it seem like they did something wrong, the punk band,
Mm-hmm.
our characters. And we're going to give Cowcatcher, the band that killed the woman, poison heroin. And we're going to get basically young skinheads to do what they need to do to get rid of the band or whatever they have to do. So that's pretty much it. And, and then once Darcy's kind of talking with people and trying to figure out the plan, I think they talk to the band who, the big guy, they've overpowered him and holding him hostage. They have a box cutter and the pistol. And Darcy comes to the door and he's like, "Hey, I want you to give up your pistol. Please, let's just, end this or whatever." Uh, yeah. And I think Pat is like, "Okay, we'll keep the bullets, but you can have the gun." And he's like, "Okay." Um, yeah, and then kind of goes bad from there.
Yeah, I think I think casting. I mean, obviously, part of the reason they cast Patrick Stewart is because he's such a big name, and for what seems to be a pretty small budget, because really almost the entire film takes place at this one location,
Yeah.
small amount of characters, not a lot of um, expensive things going on. It's shot. It's produced by A24 at a time when A24 was still a very small. Like I think their first film only came out in like 2015, 2016, and this film came out in 2016. So this is very early A24. Really, certainly not as low budget as say Murder Party, but certainly. And I don't say I'm not saying you can see the low budget, but it's clear that it's like one location. And getting Patrick Stewart was kind of a draw in. But I also think Patrick Stewart was kind of the perfect person for the role
He's pretty good, yeah.
because he's just not very intimidating as a person. Like he just seems so nice when you like look at him and see him. And
I mean, yeah. I like him in a Next Generation where he plays Jean-Luc Picard.
yeah,
In that movie, he's kind of he acts that part so well because he's both intimidating but nice in that movie.
yeah,
Like he's very intimidating, but he's also able to kind of cut through the intimidation and kind of display some kind of like emotion or something like that. In Green Room, though, he's like totally intimidating.
yeah.
He's like very scary, even though he's kind of like a small man.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's like this coldness to him, like this darkness almost that's like under it. And there's almost a sense of like you kind of want to believe him, even though like it's very clear that he's in the wrong. At least I was sort of I wouldn't say I was buying into his nonsense, but I did have this sense of wanting to trust them because he's just like when you hear him talk, he has that real smooth voice, and you know
yeah.
you're sort of like convinced, like he's like even though he's like very dark and scary, he's also like he has a certain charm to him even in this film, and you can kind of see that, and that's kind of actually how he ends up getting the gun. Is they're talking back and forth through the door because the band's locked themselves in the room with
Mhm.
uh, the big husky man and the rest of the band, and Patrick Stewart's like, "Hey, we need the gun because it's unregistered. I want to take all guns out of the situation," which it's very clearly bullshit. But they're like, we don't know what to do. What if they have guns? We kind of just want to figure out what's going on. Like we just want to know what's happening.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah, so they just decided to do it just because they don't know what they want to do. So, and then Imogen Poots, her character, she's looking through the vent through the door.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like I wasn't sure about the red laces thing, but I guess it just kind of like a way to indicate to people outside who is on our side. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Kind of like
Yeah.
a way to be like, okay, that guy has red laces, which is unusual, which means he's on our side. And he opens the door a little bit to give the gun, and she sees red laces, and right away she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, they're gonna kill us." And then he tries to go out, and they like fuck up his. They like I don't know what they do. They must like just like cut up his arm
Like
to the point
knives. Yeah.
where yeah, and he's able to get free, and um, he loses the gun, and his arm is just completely messed up. I mean, like I think even like at the wrist, it's like
Yeah.
basically like they pretty much almost like it looks great too. It looks really
Looks
really
great.
good.
Yeah.
And the big guy that they have, he is strangled again, and then they just like cut him and kill him because they're just like, yeah, whatever. Like, so which also looks great when they cut up his
Yeah.
they like cut his stomach open, they slash his stomach open. Yeah, so now they're stuck. They basically lost their gun and they're still stuck in there.
Mm-hmm. And so now Patrick Stewart. I think it's interesting the way. Um, and I think this is really smart on the part of the director and the writer, is throughout the film they continue to establish rules for how they go about killing the band, because it'd be very easy, and I think this is done with purpose because in so many horror movies, it's really easy to go, well, why didn't they just, do this or do that? Why doesn't Patrick Stewart just come in guns blazing and just kill them all? Why doesn't he do this? Why does he do that? And as he created this plan earlier, but the plan constantly changes, and he's constantly making rules for what the bad guys can do. And at this point, the bad guys can only use knives because he doesn't want any gunshots. He wants them to look like they were killed by either dogs or well, I think pretty much just dogs, right? Like that's kind of the sort of idea of it. And so the bands now realize what's going on. They're freaking out because of course they are. Pat, of course, his whole arm is just absolutely torn apart, and they're basically starting to they're trying to like beat down the walls. They're like trying to figure out how to get out of here. And they're hitting things, and one of them finds, or actually that's when the power goes off. And as the power, and at this point, there's still people moshing in like the big main room. Like there's still bands going on. Power goes off. The band sees that there's some sort of light coming from under the floor. Lights come back on. Patrick Stewart comes out to the main floor and tells all the people moshing, he's like, hey, you guys you guys should leave. He talks about their racial advocacy meeting that's going to happen, which is some sort of Nazi white pride thing. Just sort of ridiculous. And then they all disperse, so Patrick Stewart has effectively cleared out the entire space of anyone that isn't these sort of skinhead murderers or the band.
They also set up the fact that so they're able to also when the 911 calls back on the cell phone, they also do it so that they report a stabbing, which was they get like two young skinheads to like stab each other, for the good of the whatever, for the good of the cause. And the cops come and they're like, okay, whatever, and then they leave. So that's another thing that they're able to manufacture to get the cops away. And and then everyone leaves, and it's pretty much just the murderous skinheads and Patrick Stewart. And then you get to my least favorite part of the movie, which I didn't understand this part at all. Mm-hmm. So they're like you said, they're tearing up the room, and then they look they go to the floor, and they realize that under the floorboards are a drug lab.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a room that's just like floorboards like that, where it's like you can easily look through them and remove them easily like that? I thought that was really silly, especially what appears to be a basement, right? It's like a basement,
So is it I was trying to figure this out. Is this like
because he's breaking.
Right.
What'd you say?
Is it like a trap door? Is that supposed to open?
I don't think so. My impression is that those floorboards, they just look like just floorboards, and nothing underneath them is right under the drug lab. Why would you I don't know. It just seems like it's made up. It doesn't seem because if it was a solid floor, they wouldn't be able to get through it, of course.
No, and then the rest of it's a concrete ceiling, so that's why I'm thinking it'd have to be some sort of trap door that's supposed to open.
I guess so.
Isn't there
maybe I'm wrong.
No, there's not a ladder or anything there, is there?
I don't think so. I think it's just a hole that they make, right? And that they jump in and out of.
Yeah.
That just didn't seem right to me. I thought that was kind of weird. That just seemed kind of convenient just so they could discover the drug lab. I thought they could have just discovered it at a more realistic way. And they check out the drug lab and they're like, oh yeah, it's all about heroin. Yeah, pretty much at the end of the day, it's just, it's a business. It's just making heroin and selling it to skinheads. And they can't get out. I also was very confused with the architecture of, I guess the layout of everything. So they go down there and they check a door, and it turns out it's a door that's outside of the venue, but it's way outside of the venue, and that basement area doesn't look that big, So I thought that was kind of funny how it's like the building is right here and they're underneath it, and they should be all the way over here, but it looks like it's just right under there. So I just thought that was just kind of dumb. I don't know, maybe not dumb, but just kind of just a little bit distracting. It's just kind of a little detail that I thought was kind of weird, how they discovered it, and and how big is this? I can't tell. And it was just kind of maybe a little sloppy, but it doesn't like ruin the movie. It's just kind of like a point of contention I have with
Sure.
it. But I think after that is when they decide to leave. They basically get some weapons of random items and they decide to fight their way out of the building, which immediately doesn't go well.
No. So they run out. They run out the door, assuming that there's just like a bunch of people at the door. There's no one at the door. So they're walking through this big empty club place, and as they walk out into like the main room, there is a trainer who has these basically murderous dogs. They're like,
Yeah,
these vicious like Rottweilers, or something of that esteem. And he releases the dog, and the dog just immediately murders someone. And
he
it's
kills that
pretty.
tiger, the guy with like green hair.
Yeah, the guy with green hair, and he just like, he just bites his neck, and it's pretty. They don't actually show that much, but in the moment it feels pretty
Yeah,
brutal.
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
And then another person is,
He tries to go through a window and he gets stabbed like immediately.
yeah, he goes through a window, and literally right as he gets out the window, there's like people out there just stabbing him, as I assume neo-Nazis do. I don't know.
Yeah, they'll stab you. Yeah.
And so people are dying left and right, and Imogene is attacked by a dog, and she's like hitting it with a microphone stand with the microphone still on it. But as she pulls back, the microphone hits this like the speaker, or something.
Yeah, an amplifier
Yeah,
speaker.
amplifier, and it gives feedback, and that's when they realize that the feedback,
Mm-hmm.
because of such a high frequency, freaks the dogs out. So the dog leaves. The man who owns the dog just casually walks out, uh, following the dog, and um, Pat and the two women go back to the room. We're the only ones left alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the three of them are back at the green room, back at the beginning. And I think Daniel arrives, um, who was the boyfriend of the woman who got killed, Emily. So he's like, who did this? And it's like, oh, the kids from out of town did it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh, okay. So he and another guy, they go in because they're tasked to kill, the rest of the members, and
Sure.
they get to the green room and they talk to him, and Daniel realizes that it wasn't the band, it was Worm from, Cowcatcher.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that Emily and Daniel were planning to leave the skinhead life, to leave, the Nazi life or whatever. So he agrees to help them pretty much escape. And yeah, like he's just kind of like, screw these guys.
Yeah.
And then they decide to escape, and immediately, I couldn't believe how fast he died. He gets shot in the face with a shotgun, like, immediately. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, this movie wastes no time. Like, they don't want it. Like, conversations at this point like last like 2 seconds. Like, there's barely any dialogue except for maybe between Anton and Imogen. They probably have the longest conversations in the movie for the most part, especially like in the second half and the last part of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he dies right away. And they kill the guy who shoots Daniel, and they're able to get a shotgun. But and then they run outside, and then once again, they're like, everybody's there and they're shooting, and then Imogen gets shot a few times in her legs and stuff, and Sam, the guitarist of the band, she tries to shoot at a dog, and the dog kills her, and they just run back into the green room. So yeah, like that scene is just kind of crazy because it's just like, I mean, both scenes when they try to leave are just like, whoa, like, there's no escape.
So now this is like the third or fourth time they've gone back to the green room. At this point, there's no real reason they go to the green room, because like the lock doesn't work or anything. Like there's really no protection there other than they know that room, I guess. And Imogene and Pat are talking, and it's clear that like it's pretty much fucking over. And he talks about this paintball match that he talked about a little bit earlier, right before the first time they went out of the green room, which was this idea that we were in this paintball match and we were up against these ex-Marines and we were just getting brutal, just shot everywhere with paintballs because ex-Marines versus a punk band, it's obvious who's going to win. He says, but what we did, the very last round is we just went like just full force. Like we just said, fuck it. We don't care about living. We don't care about any of this. We're just going to go do it. And that's basically what Imogen and Pat decide to do for their final round.
Yeah, and this is what the reason why I compared this movie to Predator is because this movie is basically Predator. Predator is about a group of guys who go to some place that they're unfamiliar with, and it turns out it's not what it appears to be, and it turns out that there is something out there that wants to basically kill them. And like Predator and Green Room, at the end, almost everyone dies except, at the end of Predator, it's Arnold. And Arnold, just like, Imogen and Anton do, they basically go into just like, okay, all bets are off. I'm all in, even like, Arnold, he paints his face.
Yeah.
He's completely like, he constructs weapons and he creates like traps and stuff out of the environment. He's all by himself. And it's just him and the Predator. And it's like here, it's just Anton and Imogen against the white nationalists. It really is kind of the same. It really is kind of the same movie in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
which that's kind of like a weird comparison, but it really is like not that different. I mean, just like in Predator, kids get killed in the green room, just here, like throughout the film, I mean, they get picked off. And yeah, so they have their go time moment. Let's go. Two or three guys, they're sent to go in there to finish them off with a dog or something like that. And they use feedback to scare off the dog, who I think it just like runs out of the building.
Yep, just runs away.
Yeah, and then they're able to lure one of the other kids into the drug lab. That whole sequence, by the way, with like the kid in the drug lab, like really, really good.
Yeah, and just so well thought. Like it's clear that like they sat around thinking like how these two, basically with no skills at all would be able to kill, people who seem to be professional murderers. And it's just really fun. Imogene hides in like a couch, which is a really cool sort of reveal. And then after they kill that guy, and one of the things that I love is before the two guys actually go into the green room or go into the actual club, is the guy with the shotgun says, "Hey, I only have 3 shots." And he says, "Oh, but you have 1 extra then." And I think this is why the scene is so intense or suspenseful, intenseful. Intenseful is a word. Is the whole time is exactly how many shots everyone has, so exactly. It's not like one of those films where like a guy will shoot like 30 times and never reload his gun. It's very, exactly what the stakes are. And so every time the guy shoots his shotgun, and Imogene actually counts off, she says, 2 shots, 1 shot. And it creates this incredible amount of suspense that I just love, because exactly where everyone is, exactly, how they're going to fight each other. And of course, in the end, they end up killing both of them. And it's just incredible. It's an incredible scene.
Yeah, no, that's probably the best part about the movie, is that it's able to establish a really good tense tone throughout the whole thing. And it really does feel like the characters a lot to lose. Like it really does feel like the characters could be killed at any moment. Like it just feels like the stakes are super high. Everything feels super elevated and very tense and very scary. That's probably the best thing about the movie, is that it really establishes just a really great tense tone, throughout. Just really, really exciting. And yeah, they're able to defeat both the kids, like you said. And Gabe, the guy that they met at the beginning, he surrenders to Pat and Amber, Anton and Imogen. And they leave. And at this point, like basically all the skinheads have dispersed. They left it because I don't know, they feel good that
Like
Anton and
they
Imogen
think it's over. They assume that it's over.
Yeah. And I think they're like holding Gabe at gunpoint, and they walk through the woods, and they go to Darcy's house, and Gabe goes to a farm to call the cops. I wasn't a fan of that actor, by the way, the guy who plays Gabe.
Really? What? Why is that?
I thought he had like the same expression on his face the whole movie, just kind of like this dumbfounded face the whole entire time, like this sad, dumbfounded look. Like there was like no range with him at all. I didn't like him very much, even though he was like an important character because he's basically the one guy that survives at the end.
Uh-huh.
Um, I just thought he wasn't very good. Like I feel like I could have used a little bit more different reactions to things, but his reaction was the whole thing. But yeah, he goes to a farm to call the police, and Pat and Amber go to Darcy's house where there's like a couple different guys there. They kill them, and I think they have what Darcy and like another guy like at gunpoint. And yeah, Darcy like tries to run away. he
doesn't even run away. He just like did you notice like in that
Yeah.
scene he just turns around and just walks away?
Because he has a gun, so he's basically just like, yeah, I'm done. So I'm just gonna try to confuse them or something. And yeah, he pulls out the revolver from the beginning. He's able to get a shot off, but they just are able to gun him down. Yeah, and I guess the dog from who left earlier comes back to his dying owner, who they shot a minute ago, to lay next to him. Just because, I mean, just so you know what happens to everyone, I guess. And they also play like a quick, it's kind of interesting, you basically find out what happens to everyone. They play like a quick thing of the Mohawk guy. He's like vacuuming a room.
Yeah.
They play another quick thing where the band is the band who killed Emily. They're like back at their house or something, and they're watching television. And I'm assuming that they died. You know what I mean? The guy who did the stabbing, the black metal guy, he's like eating cereal or something. So I don't know if the implication is that he just got away with it, didn't get killed or anything. He didn't use the heroin.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And yeah, just like Pat and Amber just kind of like sitting there, and they're pretty much tired, and yeah.
And the very I really enjoy the last line of it is Pat goes, I finally figured out what my favorite desert island band is. Like I know what it is. And she goes, I don't give a fuck. And the movie ends.
I wasn't a huge fan of that for some reason. I didn't think it was that cute or funny. I don't know why.
I liked it. I think it's just a little tongue in cheek. Like it's supposed to, I get the ideas like basically that a film's trying to like have this like big, like moment, and so often, assuming that this director seems to like to play with the horror and thriller form, the idea that everything has sort of deeper meaning behind it, and the idea that
I see what you mean.
Isn't, it's just kind of like, it just ends, which is I enjoy it, but I could see why it's not perfect.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think the way that the movie ends, I think ends pretty well. It's like I said, everybody seems to have their own conclusion, every character we meet. So, I like that. Everything's wrapped up pretty well, and and just they just kind of sit there, and that's pretty much it for them.
So out of 10, what would you rate this movie, Andrew?
I would probably barely give it an 8. Just barely. I thought it was like really good. I didn't think it was perfect because I think some things with the some things kind of bothered me. I didn't like I said, I didn't like the acting is pretty good throughout. It's not like the greatest acting I've ever seen.
Sure.
The part with like the drug thing, where they find the drug lab, that was kind of dumb. Like I don't know, like it was just kind of like thrown in. But everybody did a good job, and it looked pretty good for the most part. Visually good looking movie. Nothing like crazy, but it looked pretty good. Really, the best part about the movie though is that it's just like tense and it's suspenseful and it feels weighty and it feels like there are stakes. Like that's pretty much the best thing I can say about the movie is that it's legitimately like pretty efficient in telling a story that's realistic. It's a somewhat realistic story, and it feels pretty on edge and it feels scary. So yeah, I think I would just barely give it an 8. Also, I like the sensibilities of the movie too. Like I like the thriller and the horror stuff, and I like the punk stuff too. I like how I like I find that like weird right wing Nazi metal punk stuff like very I think it's kind of weird and interesting. So to have a movie that kind of has that stuff in there is like very interesting to me. So it's kind of neat that that stuff is in there. Not that I like that stuff. I just think that like it's kind of like a weird, thing that I've known about for a little while. So I thought that was cool. So yeah, I would give it a low 8.
I think I'm pretty much in the same field. Although I literally just watched it, so my score may change because whenever I just watch a movie, the score is always higher because I get excited about the movie. But I'm also gonna give this movie an 8 out of 10. I found it, while it's certainly no masterpiece by any means, and there are certainly things that I think could have been improved upon. I think really it's a really tense film. It's a really fun film. I think the beginning, honestly, I find the beginning of the film to be a little slow for me. Really up until we get to the neo-Nazi place. I think the beginning is just kind of it just feels like a boring indie film. Like nothing really much happens, which is, I mean, it's fine. 9K to establish things, but I just didn't find the opening really that interesting at all.
I think I'm on the opposite just because, like I said, I like the punk stuff a lot.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good build up to when they find the dead girl. So it builds up really nicely. You feel something's wrong, and then once it like goes, when they see the dead body, it just goes. It's great.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I feel you.
Well, thank you all for listening. I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Hart.
This is With Nothing to Say. Thank you for listening or watching wherever you watch or listen to us. Please subscribe, leave a review, and all that good stuff.
Thank you for listening.